Hello and welcome again to a new episode of the kewcast. I'm John and I'm joined again by my good pal Eddie. What's up, buddy?
Hey, John. How are you?
Take two. We're having some technical difficulties in the studio here.
Your little slider's got a mind of its own, or no mind at all.
There is no slider that's easy to use. We have a new one right here, but it is not working for us today. Next time. But Eddie, we've got a good show, and we're going to be talking a lot about some data. We've got some spin tests coming up to look at both the durability of the Infinigrit as well as what's the new spin of the Luzz Inferno after the face went kind of smooth on me.
Okay.
We've got some latest news and gear gossip before that, where we're going to talk about a new poll where the poll results are more in line with what we see on the court regularly, in that there are enthusiast brands out there in the hands of the general population that the DUPR study missed. So we'll talk about a new poll there, talk about the UPA terminating the contract of Ignatowich, Glozman, and Ryan Fu. What else? I think I'll skip over my PB Vision results from this week. Also to do with spin, we're going to look at what Music Lover, one of our viewers, has been requesting for a while. I took some paddles that were very dwelly and took some paddles that I thought were very stiff and put on some PIKKL skins on these suckers to kind of standardize that variable. So the grit is the same on every paddle.
Okay.
Did 20 top spin serves. We're going to look at those results to see if the ones we perceive as have more dwell actually get more spin or not. And try to isolate some other variables to see how much dwell time plays into spin. Also, you know how this new trend we're seeing in some of the male pro players that I know of, like Gabe and Hayden, where when they get to the kitchen, they're choking up on their paddle to give them better hand speed maneuverability. We're going to look at that in the context of paddle physics and see what exactly happens there when you do choke up. Your sweet spot actually moves up, and there's some other things happening. So it's kind of an interesting insight based on a study by my friend Keith over at, what is this website?
Technical Pickleball.
Yes, thank you. Technical Pickleball. And we've got some Q&A after that.
Sounds good.
Pack show.
No paddle of the week, though.
No paddle of the week.
Very sad.
Yeah, I see a tear in Eddie's eye right now.
I'm going to have to take a moment to console myself.
Moment of silence for no paddles. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about is this new poll, and this was actually done by the kitchen, and they put it up for like only an hour, and they got almost 400 responses. And they ran this poll with one simple question: what's the last paddle you purchased? And then people wrote in. So they didn't have a list for them to choose from. People just wrote in what the last brand of paddle they purchased. So looking at those in this chart, you can see the top 30 paddle brands by purchase percentage. So Selkirk and Joola are at top, just like that study that we looked at a couple weeks ago by the SFAI-DUPR, where they took like 1,100 people in a poll and looked at their paddle preferences. And Selkirk and Joola were at the top, and then you had like 4 others that were down lower than that, and then a whole bunch of others, but there were none of the enthusiast paddle brands that we're so used to seeing. And, everything in our top 10, basically outside of Joola and Selkirk, Rhombus, Vatic,
Honolulu,
11624.
Yep.
Yeah. All these brands were not in there, and they were just in this little 2.6% other category, right? Well, here are the results of the poll by the kitchen, and you can see they are in here.
This is much, much closer to what I would have guessed would have come out from that DUPR survey.
For sure. 100%. So, like I said, the top 2 spots still belong to Selkirk and Joola, but this time the enthusiast brands are scattered throughout. And Carbon 6.0, Diadem are still kind of up there, but look at Bread and Butter right there in 5th spot. Rhombus right below them. Luzz is creeping up here. We've got Friday, Gearbox. Gearbox is in the other poll too, but Vatic, RPM is in there.
Yes.
Honolulu, Level 624. Pretty representative of kind of what I'm seeing in the wild on the courts. So if you take Bread and Butter, Rhombus, Luzz, Friday, Vatic, RPM, Honolulu, and 11624, those comprise 32% of the last purchases of this sample that the kitchen took. And the kitchens, we should say that we've done our own polls, and it's heavily biased toward paddle enthusiasts. So the top one is, the last time we did this poll was 11624, and right now it might be, Vatic, or Rhombus, any one of those. So we have a biased sample. So it was cool to see the kitchen do this, who has a much more kind of representative audience of the general population of pickleball players, and all of these enthusiast brands showing up.
Does seem to be some recency bias here, John, in that, a lot of the companies that are showing up near the top of this list have had recent releases in their paddles, like Bread and Butter, like Luzz. So there is some bias there, but overall, this is really close to where I would have put these companies.
Yeah. Yeah, and the poll the study done by DUPR was done in April of this year, 2025. So it wasn't that long ago, but I guess, in pickleball years, that was quite long ago because, the Bread and Butter logo wasn't out yet. And the Rhombus Quanta wasn't out yet. The Luzz Inferno not out. Some of the new Friday paddles not out. The Vatic V-Soles were not out yet. RPM wasn't out. So, all these ones that are kind of clustered up here, like you said, have popular recent releases. But I imagine if they did take this in April, it would look different than that SFAI-DUPR study, which begs the question, what happened in that sample where all of these enthusiast brands are missing?
Don't know.
I don't know. Nobody knows. So interesting. I'd like to see them do this study again, or at least publish more on their methodology. Like where did the sample come from?
Right.
So,
any surprises on where certain companies landed on this list, John?
I would expect to see Honolulu a little higher, probably closer to. Definitely above Rhombus, I would figure. I mean, great on Rhombus that they've come out with that Quanta, which apparently is more popular than I suspected. But man, looking at the buzz that Honolulu gets, and the number, I see a lot more Honolulus than Rhombuses.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with Friday's product offering, but I am surprised to see them so high on the list here. Right behind Diadem, ahead of Gearbox. That's a bit of a surprise, but good for them.
Yeah, for sure. What else is a surprise in here?
CPX.
What is CPX? There's like three people who were like...
The new Catherine Parento brand.
Funny. Pickle's a little bit down there. Sypic, it's making his mark on the bottom of the chart here.
Yeah.
Avora's on there. Yeah, Crush I wouldn't expect to be on there.
I don't know Crush.
I've seen a couple of their things, but yeah. Cool stuff here. Thrive's on there.
Got a visitor, John.
Oh, do we?
Yeah.
Interesting results. Good to see some.
John, why do you never offer me bacon?
Would you like some bacon with your sparkling water?
Oh, hey, thank you. I didn't even see that.
All right. Well, let's move on, Eddie. This has been all over the news for a week. It literally happened like the day after we recorded our podcast last week. So most of you already have seen this, I'm sure. But the UPA terminated the contracts of James Ignatowich, Ryan Fu, and Viv Glozman, and violating these terms that they said, we'll talk about the terms in a second, but basically they were at an event in Japan, and the PPA didn't like it for various reasons, and without any kind of warning, just said, our contracts are done. Paris Todd was also there, but she was a late addition, and they have not, as far as I know yet, terminated her contract, but they are looking into it. The reason why it wasn't terminated immediately because she did get permission before she went, but they said it was based on incomplete information. Have you been following this story much?
That's as far as I've gotten.
Okay. All right. So the event in question happened last week, which involved several days of clinics and pro exhibition matches organized by the Pickleball Japan Federation. So in PPA's mind, it was a competing organization, right? There's also a tournament associated with that, which these pros did not play in. Mm-hmm. They only did exhibitions, but more than 1,000 amateurs registered and played in this event. And RPM, so James's paddle company, was a sponsor of the event. So I think that is where the PPA has some beef with all of this. Connor Pardo issued a statement saying the advertising for these events prominently featured these pro statuses as top MLP and PPA players and champions, explicitly using the reputation and likeness we pay for to promote a direct competitor. And he went on to say, this is not a gray area and is a clear breach of their contracts. So a lot of people I've been reading were like, man, they didn't even give them a warning. I mean, this harkens back to Guangdong, who had his contract terminated, but he did have a warning first, and it was under similar circumstances, like something was going on in Asia with clinics and competing organizations and that sort of thing. Ryan Fu put up I think it was an Instagram post saying some things to clarify. Number one, this trip was approved by the UPA committee in July. 2, we taught 4 clinics. 3, we did not compete in any event. 4, we did the exact same trip last December, which was also approved by the UPA. And 5, there was no conversation before termination. Now, the UPA came back and they maintained that they have no record of Fu himself asking for permission. And so James Ignatowich basically submitted Ryan Fu's application. And the event that James pitched earlier this year, according to the UPA, was different in scope from what it eventually became. And there was a UPA spokesman, I forget his name, but he was basically like, yeah, the applications mentioned nothing about a competing organization or any kind of tournament. And, all of these things were new to us. So from an outsider looking in, I see a lot of, I can sympathize with some of the comments that I've seen, like, why didn't they give them a warning, Now, I'm not seeing everything going on behind the scenes. And, I'm sure that it is explicit in the contract that they signed that they can't be running promotions for competing organizations. So this new organization in Japan for tournaments. But, man, it just seems pretty brutal.
It's harsh. Let me tell you, when a warning or a fine might have sufficed, or at least a conversation about it, this seems pretty brutal.
It does. Did you see Zane Avertill's commentary on it?
I did.
He basically said that it might be the case. There's an ulterior motive for the PPA could have been that they just wanted James gone and Ryan Fu's collateral damage. And why would they want James gone? Well, maybe he signed a contract when he was kind of at the height of his popularity and performing better in the PPA, and they're probably paying him a lot. And now that he's not performing as well, they're looking for an excuse to get out of the contract.
Yeah.
And that was one of the speculations by Zane.
Seems plausible.
Yeah, seems plausible, but
I get both sides too. I mean, they're leveraging their status as a PPA athlete to essentially draw people into these clinics.
Yeah.
So I kind of see both sides of this.
Yeah, to make money for not just themselves, but a competing organization.
Yeah.
We'll never know exactly what's going on behind the scenes here. So, I don't want to get into speculation and all that. I just wanted to kind of present some of the facts. But,
Sounds like James has kind of accepted his fate. His Instagram post shortly after said, "Thank you to everyone who supported me in the United States. I've decided to cancel my return flight to the U.S. and remain in Asia for the foreseeable future. I'm headed to Hong Kong today, looking forward to my event with Stacked in Hong Kong."
Good old Stacked. Here we go.
Right on.
Yeah, it'll be cool to see what he does with Simon, Jeff, Phoebe. Love all those people at Stacked. Good people. We saw them in Dallas. They came to Worlds, so I'll get to hang out again. Yeah, nice. So good stuff. And I know he's working on his paddles with RPM. He's got some things in the works there. We'll see what's going on. I think he's very excited to kind of do the whole paddle company owner thing.
Man, the more time passes, the more I'm seeing Asia as just a bottomless bucket of gold.
Bucket of gold, and it terminates all the pros that go over there.
Apparently it doesn't matter to them because they're making plenty of money otherwise.
Maybe. All right, Eddie, should we move on to the next one? Okay. I wanted to give a brief aside. We did our kind of a shopping list for Black Friday deals back when they were going strong. And one of our mid-tier choices, in the $200 range were these Project Rudy glasses. And
Rudy Project.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Project Rudy. So these are kind of high-end sports glasses. They've recently entered into the pickleball space. What did they make before? Mostly like mountain biking?
Right, cycling, other outdoor extreme sports.
Gotcha. But yeah, they have all the things, they're impact resistant lenses, that the frames are very comfortable. And they make several tinted lenses that we had a podcast before the whole Black Friday buying guide where we kind of consider what are the best indoor glasses for us. And at that time, I was like, yes, these are nice, even these totally clear lenses, but I get a little bit of ghosting. And ghosting is when you look through the glasses, you look up at the lights and you kind of see a duplicate of the lights. And that only happens indoors for me. And I said that the best glasses I found to prevent ghosting were these CRBN carbon glasses, which are actually photochromic lenses, so they get darker and when you go outside and brighter light, but inside they're almost completely clear. And these are the only photochromic lenses I can use inside, and they don't ghost for me. There's a little bit of blur, but for the most part. Anyway, you gave me these, which are the Project Rudy. Geez, I don't have the brand on here. I wrote it down, but it didn't say.
Those are the cut line.
Cut line, thank you. And you apparently took off the frames from the top too, right?
There's bumpers on top and on the bottom, which I removed.
Yeah. Well, despite the little bit of ghosting I have in these, I love so much that I don't see any frame in my peripheral vision, whereas I do see this frame in my peripheral. But this is just like 360-degree field of view. And the totally clear lenses, despite, even though there's a little bit of ghosting, I'm willing to live with that, to have this kind of...
John, you're a freak of nature if you're getting 360 degrees.
Hey, my head's on a swivel. But so these have become my main. And I was kind of...
So I'm not getting those back, I guess.
You are. I'm gonna reach out to them. And this isn't a plea to get free glasses either, but highly recommended. These are amazing. And they actually save my right eye the other day. We were playing with one of our friends who has a wicked forehand drive, and he had a not delaminated, but disbonded, core crushed 11624 power. It was like the only one I've ever seen that was core crushed, but it had a thonky sound, and he was getting even more juice from his drives. He had it had to be at least 60 miles an hour, probably well above that, drive at me, and it wasn't anything face level. It was chest level, but I put my paddle up to block it. It skipped off my edge guard and went straight into my eye. Like it was a direct hit into the glasses. Thank goodness I was wearing these. So hard that the bottom of the glasses came up and gave me like a wound on the bottom of my eye. If that was a direct impact into the eye, God,
amazing.
Yeah, I could have actually lost an eye. So, and I'd been like kind of going back and forth between wearing no glasses when I was dealing with, what are the best indoor glasses. Sometimes I would play games without them and be like, God, this is so nice. Never again am I playing a pickleball game without some kind of safety glasses.
There are certain shots, and those are the exact situations. There's ricochet shots. Sometimes it's off an opponent's paddle. Sometimes it's off the net. Sometimes it's off of your own teammate's paddle.
Yeah.
But those are the ones you just can't anticipate, no matter what your reaction time is.
Yep, for sure.
So wear those glasses, John.
Wear the glasses.
Religiously.
Good stuff.
All
okay,
right.
Let's move in, Eddie. I wanted to give some updates on some spin testing I've been doing to track the durability of the grit for Infinigrit on the Boomstick, and to look at the Luzz Inferno because, we've all kind of noticed that the face goes a little bit smooth on the Inferno, seemingly a little quicker than other raw carbon fiber paddles. So we're going to look at both of those. I'm going to put up some microscopic images of each paddle face. So first we'll look at the Boomstick, brand new. This is the new Regal colorway they sent me. So you can see under the microscope, it looks like a grit texture. And there's some kind of like grid pattern underneath. I don't know exactly the surface of these Boomsticks are. They do seem to be a bit stiff and prone to cracking along the lateral edges. That's what a lot of these returns have been. But regardless, you see the grit here. If you look down at the used Boomstick.
So the grit are those kind of white dots that are showing up on the microscope.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. And I don't know, nobody knows exactly what the grit particles they use, but I know on the Mohs scale, they're very hard, similar to the 6-0 diamond, industrial diamond grits premise. You need something much harder than the ball, and the grit that the ball picks up to be more durable, right? So I don't know exactly what that is, but it is a a spray-on grip. And then if you look at the used Boomstick, and by used, I actually did track the hours. I have 28 hours on this Boomstick. And you do see some flattening, I'd say, of the grit. Now, it's a different paddle, so it's not the exact same location. But I did a scan of the paddle, and this is representative of what most of it looks like. And yeah, I do see a little bit of flattening of the grit, and maybe some of the grit particles have worked their way loose. But for the most part, it looks pretty similar. Do you see any major differences, Eddie?
The white dots that are in the new paddle are certainly more defined. Mm-hmm. They're brighter. Here, they're a little bit more dull. They do seem to be fewer of them. So definitely some degradation, but not hugely so.
Yeah. And then let's look at the microscopic images of the Luzz Inferno. So brand new, that's really typical of what raw carbon fiber looks like. And used, that's really typical of what used raw carbon fiber looks like. You can see some gouges, some flattening of the epoxy that makes up these cloth-like texture. And I also tracked hours on that. I have 22 hours on the Luzz. So now if you go down to the table below this, you can see the hours that I tracked and the spin, new versus used. Now, I have a brand new Luzz Inferno they sent me, and that's what I'm using here to track the new one. And I have my used Inferno, which is separate paddles. Same for the Selkirk Boomstick, elongated. So I have this new Regal colorway, and I'm using my used one to track it. Now, why didn't I just use my original spin numbers and then compare it? I thought this would actually be better because I could do it all in one day under the same environmental conditions, same temperature, and same ball, right? I feel like that's going to standardize things much more than using the same paddle would. So, this isn't a completely controlled experiment, but it does kind of show us some things. So the brand new Luzz Inferno got a spin RPM of 2347. I'm using a lifetime ball here. After 22 hours of play on the used one, and during the same day of spin testing with the same ball, I got 2,091. So the spin loss on that is 256 RPM. Now, that's not actually too bad after 22 hours of heavy play. That's about average. Yeah, it's about average of what I've seen on other raw carbon fiber paddles. I was expecting less, to be honest, because the face feels pretty smooth. And there are some other people who have tested different paddles, myself included. I won't name brands, but the same kind of smooth feel on those paddles generates generally about 15 to 1,600 RPM. And this was over 2,000. So this is what we'll discuss next, and how much is dwell time coming into that. So looking at the Selkirk Boomstick, the brand new one, 2343, which is right about where the brand new one, my old one, started at too. And after 28 hours, my old one got 2290 RPM. So that is a spin loss of only 53 RPM.
Nothing.
Barely anything. And I was surprised because it does feel a little smoother. You can see it smoothed out a little bit in the X-ray, but some dwell time's coming into play there too. But it is still really, really catching and gripping the ball. Now, is this entirely conclusive that Infinigrit is going to last several times longer? No. This is one point of data, but it looks very promising,
Are you using a Canon for your spin test?
No, this is 20 top spin serves.
Okay.
Now, I need to move to the Canon. It's just to afford a 10,000 frame per second camera to record the spin off that's a big investment, more than my Canon cost. Let's put it that way. I'm thinking about trying to set up the Stalker radar gun, which also measures RPM with Doppler radar, in a way that actually captures the rebound of the ball after it bounces off a 30-degree paddle, right? And if I can get that set up, then that's going to be, even if it's not as accurate as the high-speed camera, it'll be way more accurate than doing top spin serves, right? That's the next step for sure. We'll talk about some of the limitations with our spin testing. All of us paddle reviewers use the same methodology, right? And there's definitely limitations with that. And who knows? There might be plus or minus 100 RPM, based on, paddle to paddle, even on the same day with the same ball. So even with that, you can see there's more spin loss with the Inferno, which has a few less hours of play than does the Selkirk Boomstick. So like I said, not entirely conclusive, but definitely some promising initial data.
Have you seen in paddles like the Inferno where you see this drop, does that level off or does that continue to fall?
I don't have conclusive data on that because after it hits like 1500, I'm just not playing with it anymore. It's garbage. So I haven't seen that curve continue.
But 2091 is probably not the bottom.
Say what?
The number here, 2091 RPM on the used Inferno is probably not the bottom.
Yeah, no, I'm still playing with that just fine. I don't feel necessarily like I need to change that out. I do notice a little bit of spin loss compared to a new one. Around 200 RPM is when I think most people can tell the difference in spin between two paddles. And we'll talk about this in a second too. But once it gets over like 2300, it actually is really hard to tell. Like, what's the difference between a 2300 and a 2500 RPM spin? It's actually really hard to tell the difference between that or anything I'd say over 2200 because we don't get that very often, right? Not many paddles are capable of doing that, so I don't think we can really understand when that happens and what it does besides shaping the ball a lot more. But regardless, we'll talk about that in a second. Anything else on these?
No, would love to see a similar thing with the 6-0 Coral and the Opal as well as the Spartus and their Permagrit.
Yes.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Would love to see some data there as well.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the next one. It's been difficult on 6-0 because they went through all the issues with USAP saying they have to tone down their grit. And, so the original Opal that I was playing with has a way grittier texture and surface than does the production model. So I just got a brand new production model of the Opal in, by the way, which I will be testing. Okay. So these results will be coming for this. Yeah, and for all of these new kind of peel ply grit textures.
I didn't think those first Opals were particularly gritty.
Not as gritty as the Ruby Pro. That thing was nuts.
Exactly.
But more gritty than the
Loco for
one.
that matter.
Yeah. I think it's an issue with the USAP's methodology, right? Where paddles can be submitted and pass, and then the ones that hit the market aren't necessarily the same grit level. Anywho, let's move on. So again, shout out on this experiment to Music Lover. He or she is the commenter who inspired this idea. And on one of their comments several weeks ago, they were like, hey, you have these PIKKL skins, which are these replaceable grits that you can put on paddles. Why don't you test to see how much dwell time actually plays a role in spin by putting using a bunch of different paddles and putting these PIKKL skins on them to kind of hold that variable constant, because we know all of the PIKKL skins have the same grit. And, let's see where everything fleshes out.
So the underlying texture underneath that PIKKL skin makes no difference?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah. That's the theory. You'd have to test that, but based on this wooden paddle behind you, it makes no difference. I did.
That's funny.
Yeah. So here are the paddles we tested.
So that doesn't feel very gritty.
No. Let's talk about that before the paddles we tested. Because I've seen some gripes in Discord about these PIKKL skins saying that they don't work, they don't produce good spin, they feel super flat and glossy. They do not feel like aggressive peel ply texture. They feel much smoother. However, they rip crazy spin. And I was surprised too. And even there's so much that goes into you feeling the texture and getting a preconceived notion of what the ball's going to spin that goes into it. And feeling those, they feel smooth. Even when I went out to test the paddles, I did like 10 top spin serves, and I wasn't looking at the radar gun to see what the RPMs were. And I was like, these aren't spinning that great. And, I imagine it's under 2,000. And it was 2,300 something, right? So it gets way more spin than you would expect, especially after you touch it. So don't judge a book by its cover in this case. These PIKKL skins get elite spin.
Boy, and you really wouldn't. I mean, it's all on what the ball feels, right? It doesn't matter what our fingers are doing, but it does feel very smooth.
Very smooth, yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. All right, anyway, so here are the paddles that I tested with the PIKKL skins on. The Selkirk Boomstick, both the wide body and the elongated. And I wanted to compare ones that we perceive as very dwelly with ones we perceive as very stiff. So we already know that the stiffest paddle in here is this wooden paddle, right? What's another stiff paddle you can think of, Eddie?
The Franklin.
Franklins are stiff, especially like the 13 millimeter Paris.
Yep.
Paris Todd. I was wanting to look at the power air. I couldn't find it, so I used the Selkirk 007, which also feels very plank-like and board-like, especially the 10 millimeter one. Right?
Ow.
Remember how stiff that one was, and like the dwelliest paddles. What first comes to your mind for those?
I mean, the Luzz is pretty dwelly.
Yeah.
The Boomsticks are obviously dwelly.
Yeah.
The Loco's pretty dwelly.
Yep.
Yeah, so
All
all
these.
those new Gen 4 paddles tend to have that feeling. The body helix.
Yep. You I didn't include the body helix, but you named off all the paddles that I did include. Selkirk Boomstick, both the wide body and elongated, the Luzz Inferno, the Gearbox GX2 Power, which I also think is very dwelly, right? Bread and Butter Loco. And then for stiffer paddles, I chose the Franklin C45 Paris Todd, which is the 13 millimeter. That one feels stiff to me. The Selkirk 007 Epic, very stiff. And then obviously the wooden paddle here is going to be the stiffest of those. So let's look at the results here. I also tracked static weight, swing weight, and thickness. And I measured all of these with the PIKKL skin on, and I actually measured the thickness because I had a feeling that we're not only dealing with dwell here. Even though we're isolating the grit, some other things are coming into play that factor into spin. We'll talk about those in a second.
Okay, interesting.
All right, let's look at the bar chart here. So far and away, the most spin on this was the Selkirk Boomstick wide body, which came in at nearly 2,600 RPM with the PIKKL skin on.
That's outrageous.
That's huge spin, right? Huge spin. That's almost like Diadem Hush level. And it's same day. I'm using the same swing mechanics, same ball, same temperature, same humidity. So, I'm controlling as many variables as I can. Not the most controlled experiment. Clearly, a ball cannon and something else would be better. But regardless, the next one down, surprisingly, the Franklin C45 Paris Todd came in at almost 2,500, about 100 below. Then in descending order, we had the Luzz Inferno, the Selkirk Boomstick Elongated, Gearbox GX2 Power Hybrid, the Bread and Butter Loco, the PIKKL wooden paddle, and then the Selkirk 007 Epic. So, I'm seeing the trend that we expected in here, where the two stiffest paddles we all can agree on are the wooden paddle and the 007 get the worst spin. And it's not a huge magnitude, but it is 250 less than the highest spinning paddle, right? Mm-hmm. So enough to be very noticeable. It still really surprised me when I put that PIKKL skin on this wooden paddle and started serving. I'm like, no way this is going to get above 2,000. And it was ripping 2,300, 2,300.
I was going to say, the worst performer in this group is still a pretty elite performer.
Yes. Those PIKKL skins are no joke, let me tell you. All right. So this kind of begs the question. All right. So the general trend is what we expected. The paddles we think are more dwelly ended up getting more spin, and the ones we know are stiffer ended up getting less spin. But there are some anomalies in here, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say that the Selkirk Boomstick, it feels stiff. It's a stiff and hollow paddle. But we know it gets good dwell, right? Because, it's full foam, and we know it's there, but I think it's harder to feel in the Selkirk Boomstick than it is the Luzz Inferno, for example, which has a more plush, springy feel. You can feel, and the Gearbox GX2 Power, you can feel that ball kind of sink in and then be released. The Bread and Butter Loco feels a little stiffer to me because of the fiberglass layer, but it's still very dwelly as well. And but the oddball here is the Franklin C45, especially the Paris Todd version, which is only 13 millimeters.
Yeah.
It feels stiff. It is a Gen 3, so there's going to be some dwell in there, more than the wooden paddle by all means, but not as much as what you would expect with full foam floating core paddle.
That's right.
Right. Which got me thinking, why would this get so much more spin? It came in second. And then I was like, swing weight. Swing weight controls how fast you can swing the paddle head, right? And paddle head speed will definitely correlate with spin. The more speed you can get on the paddle, the more spin you're going to generate, right? Unless it's slipping off the surface. And clearly these PIKKL skins that have whatever magical grit they have in there that doesn't feel very gritty when you touch it, but spins the ball well. There's not much slippage, if any, on these things. So what I did with the Paris C45 was weighted it up, and I put like 1 gram per inch tuning tape at 9 and 3 all the way up over the top, like one big strip going all the way to make it as head heavy as possible. And that, if you look at the table, if we go back to the table, let's talk stock first. So the C45 Paris Todd stock weighs only 7.6 ounces static and has a swing weight of 102.3. So almost no swing weight. And after I added all that tuning tape, I bumped the static weight up to 8.2 and the swing weight up to 119.6. So that brings it in the realm of some of these others, like the Luzz Inferno and, some of the high teens, right? All right, and looking at the spin after I did that, on the same paddle, it did drop, and quite noticeably. It dropped from second place down to third from last, so 24.98 down to 24.11, right? So lost 90 RPM, which did move it quite significantly in this. So clearly, head speed of the paddle is making a difference. So takeaway point, one other chart we should look at here is the scatter plot. So paddle head speed is going to be correlated with spin, RPM. Also, another thing that has a slight correlation is paddle thickness. So what we can see here is a weak positive correlation between paddle thickness and spin. And again, I didn't take like their reported statistics. I actually measured with calipers each of these paddles' thicknesses. And you can see it ranges from 10 up to just over 16 millimeters. And yeah, this is a general weak positive correlation, R squared of 0.39. So not significant by any means, but still a pattern, right? So makes sense. The thicker the core, the more kind of dwell you're going to get in that core, So before I talk about the summary points, anything you want to talk about?
What's the correlation between swing weight and spin?
Negative correlation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even less than paddle thickness.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So like, I didn't plot this, but taking the Paris C45, we can see that stock weight with a low swing weight, it gets higher spin than the modified one with heavier swing weight, because I'm not able to generate as fast of a paddle head speed with that to brush up on the ball as quickly, so it gets less spin, right? So it's going to be, instead of a positive, it would probably be a weak negative correlation as well, because there's lots of other things going on. And I can imagine there are other things I'm not thinking of that can also go into spin, that I'm not thinking of. But the ones that come to mind right now are dwell time definitely plays a role. Thickness of the paddle plays a role, and swing weight.
Going with the Boomstick wide body.
Man, that performed very well. And I'm going to revise my Boomstick wide body just regular spin results, because I did that again yesterday, and it scored right there with the elongated. And on my master spreadsheet database for paddles, it got slightly less, like, I don't know, somewhere less than 100 RPM less than the elongated. And that always struck me as odd anyway, because normally they perform about the same, or sometimes the wide bodies, given that they have lower swing weights, actually get better spin, right?
Right.
It's often the case. So I'll be updating that.
Yeah,
so
I wonder if we'll see some of those differences kind of come through in paddle shapes.
Yep.
As it relates to spin.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so to summarize these data, dwell definitely contributes to spin, but not as much as grit does. Grit is, I'd probably say, 90% of what generates spin on a pickleball paddle. So looking at the highest to lowest, so this wood plank of a paddle we have over here, up to the Selkirk wide body Boomstick, it's only a 250 RPM difference, which is significant. Like, nobody wants to lose 250 RPM on their paddle. But you take that grit off, and you're going to lose 1,000 RPM right away, right? So grit plays a much bigger role than does dwell time.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, it's like comes in at 1,100 RPM.
You can kind of feel it on here.
Yeah, if you use your nails,
right.
your skin kind of slides over. It doesn't grab as much as your skin, but yeah. So yeah, spin is number one. Dwell is much lower, but it does play an effect. It does play a role in spin.
And there may be a tiny bit of dwell just in the pickle skin itself.
Yeah, it's those cells in the wood, right?
No, I meant just the pickle skin.
Oh, the pickle skin itself. Okay, yeah,
It does
that could be.
feel like it has a little bit, maybe in the adhesive or something, has a little bit of push to it.
Maybe. Secondly, paddle thickness also contributes to dwell. So the thicker the paddle, the more dwell you get, and the more that enhances spin. Third, paddle head speed contributes to spin. So the lower swing weight equals faster hand speed and the ability to generate more head speed on the paddle to generate more spin. So, there are more variables than than what we initially went into this thinking there might be. But great idea to do this. And I think it does illuminate some things and brought up additional questions, just like the scientific method always does, right?
I love it.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, so we've got a deep dive, and just wanted to talk about some physics of the paddles based on a new study by Keith, my friend from Technical Pickleball. I'll put a link up in the description, but he didn't talk about this specifically the way I'm going to talk about it, but I wanted to tie it in with this new trend we're seeing with some of the pro players like Hayden Patriquin and Gabe Tardio, where when they're playing at the back of the court, they are playing lower on their paddle and they choke up at the kitchen. And sometimes some male players and female, I think also, are actually choking up full time now because of the hand speed benefits it gives you at the kitchen. Now, Braden did a cool study where he cut the end of the handle off at 1 inch from the bottom and remeasured swing weight. And every inch of the paddle you remove, 1 inch, reduces swing weight by 20 points.
Holy cow.
Yeah, right? So that's significant. So if you move your hand up 1 inch on the paddle, you are no longer playing with a 120 swing weight elongated. You're playing with a 100, which is that's like going from
Makes sense.
the Paris Todd C45 up to the, whatever elongated you're playing with. Massive, massive difference. Okay. So what I wanted to tie that into with Keith's study is that when you move your hand up, you're actually also moving up your sweet spot on your paddle, at least where it feels good to hit it. Now, sweet spot is a difficult thing to wrap your mind around.
When you say up, this way or this way?
Up towards the hip,
okay.
Right. And it's confusing also because that's where I consider up versus down. And Keith in his study has it the opposite. He's saying up is down, up is my down, and my up is his down. So we'll get it all sorted out with props. But yeah, so now when I say swing weight, I'm not talking about those Q core curves we're seeing where there actually is a spot on every paddle where it is most performative, meaning it returns the highest ratio of inbound to outbound. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's mostly around 4, but sometimes it's higher up on the paddle at 3 inches from the tip. Other times it's down in the middle of the paddle face. That's not what I'm talking about. There's always a place on the paddle that feels best to hit the ball because it sends the least vibrations into your hand. There are vibration nodes on every paddle. Most people have seen me tap on the paddle with a drum mallet. You can actually hear it when you're hitting off the sweet spot. If you tie your paddle onto a string, hold your paddle up with the string tied to the handle and tap on it. You can even do it with your fingers because there's actually 2 vibration nodes. One goes about 4 inches from the top of the paddle. And the other is about 4 inches from the bottom of the handle. So if you hold it, I'll hold it at the very base of the handle just to show that you can't hear anything. Sounds like a wood block. When you hold it at the vibration node on the handle, which is about 4 inches from the base, and then tap on it, you're starting to get a bit of a tone there. Can you hear the difference? There's a bit of a tone there.
Dead.
Yep. Okay. Anyway, every paddle has its own frequency, right? Its own kind of musical note. But also, you can tap up and down, and eventually the sound will go away when you're hitting that vibration node where it feels best to hit the paddle. Because when you're hearing that sound, the frequency tone of the paddle, it's not a good thing to hit the ball there because that tone is translated into vibrations which go into your hand, right? Okay. So this 4-inch node of vibration where we typically hold a paddle, which is like a fulcrum of 2 inches from the handle. That's where most people play. If you move your hand up an inch, according to Keith's study, it moves that vibration node up an inch too.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So let's get into the technical details and we'll wrap back around to kind of tie a bow on it in a second. So what Keith is doing, again, I'll put a link to his study. I sent him my impact hammer. I bought an impact hammer over a year ago now because I had grand ideas to do similar studies. I just never got the time. So he has the time. He's retired. I sent him. He's much smarter than me in terms of engineering. I sent him my impact hammer. What it does is you pull this plunger on the thing and then when you press it into any object, it delivers a force of 1 joule, right? 1 joule impact. So the equivalent of 1 joule of impact is like a ball hitting the paddle at 25 miles an hour. Not crazy hard, but an aggressive speed up, something like that, or a flick. That's kind of. So imagine holding a paddle and just totally still, and it receiving a ball at 25 miles an hour. That's the kind of impact we're talking about here. Looking at Keith's diagram of and explanation of these different kind of definitions, words he's using. So the pivot point, which is also known as the fulcrum, is 2 inches from the handle. And that's significant because that's where we're testing PB core and Q core with. That's where we correct for swing weight, assuming that the pivot point or the fulcrum is there. So pivot point is just another name for fulcrum, and that's where basically your paddle is spinning as you're swinging it. Balance point, as we learned, is literally where the paddle will balance on your finger. And a really easy way to do that is put it on a table, slide it until it starts tipping, and then mark that, and that's your balance point. And it's measured from the base of the handle up to that balance point. And then center of percussion is that vibration node, basically, relative to the 2 inches, where it feels best to hit the paddle with the ball, hit the ball with the paddle, right? So if you look, if the pivot point is at 2 inches, then the center of percussion is 2 inches higher on the paddle face, or lower, as Keith is saying, than the balance point. You see that? So pivot point's 2 inches, balance point's 10 inches, center of percussion is going to be 12 inches. Right.
So the center of percussion is always going to be same as the pivot point plus. Interesting.
Plus the pivot point.
Huh.
Yeah.
I would think that would be variable depending on the paddle.
I would too. Yeah. I think, I trust Keith's data here. I just need to look more into center of percussion, but yeah, that's what I'm getting from this diagram at least. All right. So when hitting the balance point, so what he did is he drilled a hole in the handle and put a bar through the hole and put it like on a parallel sliding system of bars, right? So it's basically hanging from this bar, and it's able to slide along that bar. You know what I mean? And then he punches it with the impact hammer and watches on high-speed video how the paddle responds to that. Okay, so what do you think would happen when you hit exactly at the balance point on the paddle?
I think you're going to see a flipping up of the paddle and less movement forward.
So the balance point.
Yeah.
So actually when you hit on the balance point of the paddle, the whole paddle moves without any rotation. So the whole paddle just slides along that cylinder, right? When you hit above the balance point, I'm using Keith's terminology here. I'm reversing mine. I'm going to confuse the crap out of everybody. When you hit closer to the center of the paddle, closer to the handle of the paddle, what happens is the handle moves first, right? The handle moves out first, and then the head of the paddle catches up eventually, right? So here's the balance point. When you hit the balance point, the whole paddle moves without any rotation. When you hit further toward the handle, away from the balance point, the handle will start to move first, and then the paddle head catches up. When you do the reverse of that, when you hit closer to the tip of the paddle from the balance point, the head of the paddle moves first, and then
right. That's starting to make sense.
Yeah, and then the whole thing moves back. So there's that, and there's a bunch of other cool stuff going on. He actually measured the G, so how many G the impact force is with 1 joule, 250 G. Which blew my mind because fighter pilots began blacking out at 5G. A car crash can impose death at about 70 G. But what the science tells us is that the impact of G depends on how long you're exposed to it. And the pickleball only hits a paddle for 1 or 2 milliseconds, right? So it can be probably thousands of G before it actually starts damaging you, right? So you're absorbing that so quickly that it doesn't matter anyway.
And I guess even less so with your impact hammer.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so if we look, he also put a accelerometer on the paddle to measure vibration frequencies, and we look at these charts he shows here. So the impact force at the pivot point, it shows that, so the x-axis is time in milliseconds. This whole x-axis scale is 2 milliseconds in total. And then the y-axis is the frequency and the magnitude of that frequency. So you can see, depending on where the paddle is hit, it's basically mapping, is the handle of the paddle moving first or the head of the paddle moving first? And how long does it take for that to equalize? And if you expand the x-axis out to several milliseconds, you can see it fluctuates, it pulsates. So it begins in the positive and then it drops in the negative and vice versa. So and that's all of those curves you see in there, that's the buzz you're feeling. So the moral of the story is the further you hit away from the center of percussion on the paddle relative to your pivot point, so where your hand is gripping it, the crappier that it's going to feel because those vibrations increase in frequency and magnitude and they go directly into your hand. And something else cool is when you hit, now I'm going to show this. If you're listening at home, I'm going to show like kind of right in the lower middle of the paddle face is the balance point. And 2 inches above that is the center of percussion. So kind of right where you think the sweet spot's going to be, about 4 inches down from the top of the paddle. If you hit above that, going toward the top of the paddle, you're going to feel that buzz in your index finger and your middle finger. If you hit below that center of percussion, you're going to, and your thumb on the first one. If you hit it below, you're going to feel it in your pinky and your ring finger. Because that is moving the buzz up and down your handle according to where it hits on the face of the paddle, right? And that brings us back to the original moral of the story is when you move your hand up the paddle 2 inches, it's also going to feel like garbage to hit the paddle where it normally feels really great. Now, are people like Hayden and Gabe consciously thinking, I need to hit the paddle 2 inches higher now? No, it's just they're used to hitting at that certain distance from their hand, and then instinctually happens when they're choking up in the paddle. They're hitting further up on the paddle face because that's where it feels best and sends less vibrations into your hand.
Wow.
Eddie, I was racing to get to the end of that because I saw you were just like,
no,
you know what would be nice right now?
Right here with
a sandwich and some bacon would be nice right now.
Henry!
Good stuff. I don't know why I enjoy this. We'll see if any of our viewers are still watching.
But to be clear, they are doing this for hand speed.
They're doing it for hand speed.
More along the lines of swing weight reduction than any kind of feeling that they're getting back to the paddle. Exactly.
But it does change the performance of the paddle according to where you hit it on the paddle face.
Now, the performance, the max core on the paddle doesn't change regardless of where you hold the paddle.
Or does it? Interesting topic. Well, yes, it does. Because, wait, let me make sure I understand your question correctly. Are you saying that the performance is the performance across the paddle face and remains the same regardless of where you hold the paddle? I'll have to look into that because baked into the PB core formula is the balance point, or the pivot point, which is your fulcrum. If you move it up, that changes the result of the PB core. I think what's going to happen in the similar way that it feels better to hit a paddle an inch higher on the face when you're choking up an inch higher, is that the same things are going to just be pushed further up the paddle face. Do you know what I mean?
Well, let's figure that out.
let's test that. That's a good question. Yeah, what else were you saying there?
That's it.
Okay. Yeah.
I guess the question, John, is what are you doing at the kitchen?
I keep my hand in one spot. I'm a simple man, Eddie.
Okay.
I can't. We do have friends, so Zach changes his grip. Most people, some people use the Arkansas backhand, and they do the Riley Newman pancake when they get to the kitchen, and then switch it back to continental or semi-western when they get back to the baseline. I do a little bit of that, but it's not anything as extreme,
So even forehand to backhand, you're maintaining the same continental grip?
For the most part, yeah. It might be one or two bevels, or one bevel off is about as most as I move my hand. How about you?
Oh, I definitely switch grips.
Okay.
Forehand to backhand. More towards, what is that? Towards the east? Mm-hmm. No, towards the west.
Yeah.
On the backhand.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, for the most part, I'm right continental, maybe a little bit semi-western.
And I don't think I ever
serves.
Use continental.
Interesting. So you're semi-western and then semi-eastern, right?
You got it.
Okay.
A little east meets west.
The story of your life. Okay. Got a tip of the week here.
All right.
And shout out to our friend Eric Noodleman, who's like, you know what you need to name your segment, your tip of the week segment? Q-tip. So, Eric, this goes out to you. This is the Q-tip for this week. Yeah. All right. So the tip this week is think less about technique and more about footwork. So I had never seen this gentleman's YouTube channel, but something came up in my recommended list, and I clicked on it. It was a video by Back Paddle Pickleball. And I don't know this guy. I don't know any of his other videos. He seems to be proficient at pickleball. I don't know how good he is, but he had a really good concept here, which I think bears repeating. And that is that, you know, I do this all the time. Every time I miss a ball or I shank a ball, I'll do little shadow swings to be like, what in the heck happened there, right? Like, what's wrong in my swing?
Right.
That I just totally shanked that ball. But the majority of the time spent on the court, if you break down a pro match, the important thing is before you hit the ball is to be in the right position to hit that ball. So footwork is paramount, right? If you're leaning to get it, doesn't matter how great your form is, it's going to be screwed up because you're stretching and you're out of position to get there. So, you know, he broke down, I think it was like something like 93% is footwork and 7% is actual swinging, just starting with the backswing and going through, right? So regardless, whatever the numbers are, it's much more important to work on footwork probably than the mechanics of the swing, right? And I think most of us think about it backwards, right?
Yeah, that distance from the ball is so crucial, particularly when you're going from forehand to backhand, where those differences can be much different.
Yeah, for sure.
Critical.
Yeah. You know, and I've been doing that consciously based on Scott Fliegelman's advice, you know, and the whole DEFCON 1 concept, you know, when you're in the ready position for anything that might come at you at the kitchen, and also, you know, working your way into the kitchen, split stepping, and, you know, having your feet planted when the ball is on your opponent's paddle. All that requires, you know, consciously thinking about footwork, and then eventually that becoming muscle memory. And one of the things, like, if you haven't done it yet, people listening and viewing, definitely watch yourself on video. It's a humbling experience. You know, you look way less cool than you think you're going to look, but it highlights a lot of the weaknesses in your game. And don't become obsessed with it like I did and just come to the conclusion that you're a terrible pickleball player, because there is a self-fulfilling prophecy there too. You can go too far down that hole, but it's great to recognize your weaknesses and work on those. And for me, a lot of it was footwork.
That's why I love the ball machine, is you can fine-tune that footwork before you even step on the court in a real game.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, well, shout out to Back Paddle Pickleball. That's a good video. I'll put a link to that in the description too.
Well, I don't have a tip this week, John, but I was in D.C. for a while visiting family and my mom, and I was having a conversation with my brother-in-law just about, you know, reminiscing about our youth and that kind of thing. He's about the same age that I am, 50s. I don't know about how your upbringing was, but when we were kids, we weren't one-sport athletes. We were just outside all the time doing whatever.
Yeah.
I played like 4 different sports in middle school and high school. I ran track, I played soccer, I played baseball, and, you know, all that stuff. But even when I wasn't doing that, it was always like doing something different with the neighborhood kids or whatever. I'm guessing your upbringing was probably pretty similar.
Yeah. I had a lot of things going on outside all the time. That's a very big difference between today's society.
Yeah, today's kids are, you know, they've got to commit to one sport and do that sport pretty much for their lives.
Yeah, right.
Otherwise, they're not going to get that scholarship. And they're not going to become pro athletes. But that's kind of the mindset these days. And I think that there's a real loss there in terms of not just your mindset and your mental capacity, but also your ability to be just an outstanding athlete. Like, you are so good at pickleball, and I'm adequate because we did so many things, I think, in our developmental era where hand-eye coordination was just baked in from the beginning. And it wasn't because of pickleball. Yeah. It's because of all the many other things that we did.
Right.
And I think that's maybe not a lesson, but just something to take forward in that, you know, the cross-training that folks might do even at our age, really important for coordination, for balance, for stability, just for injury prevention, you know, all of these things. I think are really important because, man, they didn't raise them like they raised us.
No. I mean, honestly, I was outside, every daylight hour, short of coming in to eat occasionally. I was outside. If I wasn't playing baseball or tennis, I was
100%.
throwing rocks at trees, and throwing stuff, hitting stuff with sticks and balls. It's just like your whole life,
Right.
And it does build a lot of muscle memory.
But now you could, if not pickleball, you could pick up any sport and with a little bit of time be competent at it, I bet.
Yeah, good stuff, Eddie. I like it.
Good stuff.
But by the way, you are way better at pickleball than I am.
It's been a while since I've seen you on the court, so we don't know that.
All right, so let's move on to Q&A. We've got pulled in a few this week.
Yeah, first question from Zach Carmichael. Boomstick really needs a consumer version that's like $220, $250.
Agree.
What would that look like?
Totally agree. Yeah, as long as they didn't change the Boomstick too much. I mean, why not just release the Boomstick as it is?
As part of their Selkirk line?
Yeah, and make it consumer. I mean, you could take, what would you change in it? I don't think they need to change anything, really. I mean, it's pretty cool that the Boomstick performed so well, and when it was released, it was really kind of unique, and it still stands on its own for sure, but I think other paddle companies have caught up to a large extent, and I don't think it would be any sweat off of Selkirk's back to just release that sucker as it is into its main line. Different colorways, maybe, I don't know.
Now, they've said that they've made adjustments from their Labs products to their main Selkirk lines with their previous releases. Mm-hmm. Do you see any tweaks along the way?
Like, would I recommend any tweaks?
Yeah.
Fix the edge guards from coming loose and the cracking
fair.
and the cracking on the face. It's still an issue. Actually, I'm gonna have to warranty my second paddle with them because my face has linear cracks going down close to the edge guards. My first one, the edge guard came loose, and this one, and I see that on Discord. It's now. I keep mentioning this. The flip side of that is the customer service at Selkirk is fantastic, and you get a new paddle while you get to keep your old one in just a few days. And I know that some of the people on Discord are, kind of like. There's a funny joke where it's like, yeah, this is Infinigrit because we have to warranty the paddle every few weeks to get a new paddle. So you're getting a freshie every few weeks so the grit never wears down. But regardless, fix those couple of things, those loose ends, and release it as a consumer product for cheaper.
Well, this next question dovetails nicely with that one. This one from Max Mappler. Curious to see if Slyce Slydrs cause stress or edgeguard issues like the MOI system on Boomstick paddles. Same concept, essentially. So potentially that's part of your edgeguard and or face issues with the Boomstick or those MOI weights.
Could be, yeah. I have a hunch that the face cracking is partially related to the weights, but also something about that face material they're putting on the Boomstick. Look at it under a microscope that we saw earlier. It's kind of that grid pattern. I don't know exactly what's going on there, but it seems kind of stiff. It's giving the paddle some stiffness. But regardless, Eddie, you're on the cutting edge of that research for Slyce Slydrs. So let us know if your edge guards start coming loose.
I have not noticed anything yet. I've got now 4 pairs of sliders on various paddles.
Nice.
And no damage yet. And I'm wondering if what we're seeing on the Selkirk is because of the concentrated nature of the weight on the paddle or if it's the way that they're actually affixed to the edge guard itself.
Maybe. Or the edge guard is affixed to the paddle. Maybe the epoxy was wrong, right? Not as absorbing.
But 250 Gs and over again, it's going to have an effect.
True.
Great. Thanks, Max. Next question, John, from Wings of Peace Toronto. Which full foam paddles play like or are closest to the Joola Gen 3 paddles in terms of feel?
Okay. I like that one. Do you have any thoughts, Eddie?
I hit around with the Scorpius version of the Gen 3 today. And I played around with all my other Gen 4 paddles today. I would say in terms of feel, the closest I came was the Vatic V-Sole and the Coral.
Oh, wow.
A little bit of that softness, some punchiness there, a little bit of trampoline. Some of this was auditory in nature. There's a bit of deepness in the Joola that came out with those 2 paddles, but nothing like the Boomstick or the Luzz or anything like that. So I don't know if it's face layup along with the core or something else, but those are my 2 closest in terms of feel.
this is fascinating, and this brings us to another topic, because I agree with you on the Vatic VSOL Pro, especially the flash shape, but not at all on the Coral. And some of us paddle review, me and Chris and some others, and Justin and Lewis and Kyle with Pickleball Effect, we were all chatting in a group chat, and we were like, man, you guys had the worst take on paddle feel. We're all like, no, you had the worst take. But we're split, totally split. You know, I have this new feel chart, you know, and it goes from, I think this is valid. We need to start kind of classifying at least, or giving people definitions on how to explain how they feel a paddle. Sure. So going from soft to, or stiff down to soft on the y-axis, and x-axis would be dense over to hollow. I think that captures, you know, those four realms, those four quadrants capture most paddles. But a lot of that has to do with neurobiology, the vibration frequencies that come into your hand, as well as where your hand is on the paddle. And once you get into neurobiology, you're getting into subjectivity, because different people respond differently according to their own unique biology to different vibration frequencies. And what one person feels is tinny or annoying vibration, another person might be like, that is what I love. You know, that feels amazing. You know, there's going to be some patterns across all humans, but there's a lot more subjectivity and variability, I think, person to person with how a paddle feels than there is going to be with firepower, spin, and some of these more objective measurements. So like the Coral, I don't think that plays at all like a Joola Gen 3. The Joola 4s are stiffer and hollower to me. So I'd actually say like the Luzz is not as stiff, but it has that hollow feel. The Boomstick feels more Joola 4-ish to me because it is stiff and hollow. It's stiffer than the Joola Pro 4s. I feel like the Loco is a pretty close full foam feel to the Joola Pro 4s, but you may feel totally different. This person who asked the question may feel totally different too. So it's kind of a fascinating topic.
You know, we're in an era of paddles, John, where there's not a ton of difference between paddles. We're talking about nuance here, very slight degrees of difference.
For sure.
I think on the edges, it's easier for us to say, well, yeah, that's like the 007.
Yeah.
It's a crap paddle.
Nobody's going to say that's a pillowy paddle, right?
Right, but now we've got so many in the middle here that are just very close to each other.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the personal preference now plays an even greater role, despite the fact that we're narrowing sort of the universe of paddles.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So what would be your one paddle that's closest to the Joola Gen 3?
All right, let's define Joola Gen 3 here. So are we talking the Pro 4s?
The polypropylene, trampoline.
Right. So there's two Joola Gen 3s. There's the 3S, right? And then there's the Pro 4. And the only difference there are the Pro 4 has the added foam in the neck, but all of them are kind of semi-floating polypropylene cores.
Okay.
So I'm going to go Pro 4 here because I like the feel of that one better than the 3S.
I was thinking of the 3 when I did my little experiment.
Okay. So for me, if I had to compare it to a Pro 4, let's say a Perseus Pro 4, I'm going to go, I will agree with you, Eddie, that some of those Vatic VSOL Pros feel very much like a Joola Pro 4. To me, the hybrid shape does most.
That's what exactly. Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Hey,
we're in agreement.
Let's move on before we start to disagree.
Okay. Pickleball high. How many weeks until the Honolulu J6CR replaces the Boomstick on your list, Mr. Kew? Man, that CR is getting a lot of
Yes, it is.
a lot of attention.
There are people legit angry at me that I'm refusing to talk in detail about it. But honestly, so I have 6 prototypes of this paddle, right? And some of them have the face designs on them.
These are 6 different, not 6 of the same thing.
No, 6 different prototypes. I am doing testing, Q-Core testing for the owner of Honolulu, so he can narrow down what he wants and send that to USAP. I think he sent the last one to USAP for approval.
All right.
They're not approved yet, but they probably will be. And the sixth one, 1 through 5 all played slightly different, but they all had about the same firepower level as the J2 and F, right? Which I found to be a curious choice. We've all now seen the X-rays of these CRs. It looks really pretty amazing. It's got a bunch of stuff going on. It's got the notching like the NFs do, but it also has like a circular block of foam in the neck region, and it's got some grooves cut into the paddle face. Cool stuff going on. But regardless, I would have said, if you would have told me to explain 1 through 5, prototypes 1 through 5 would have been like similar firepower and feel to the J2 and F. I don't know if this is needed in the marketplace. However, that sixth one, even though it has the same look in the X-ray, they're actually CT scans that have been leaked online. Even though it has the same look, it plays very differently. And it has much more firepower. I'd put it at about the bread and butter loco level firepower. It's a little stiffer and hollower rather than the denser, softer feel of the NF and FC Plus. And yeah, I think it has that for Honolulu is an excellent part of the market to capture, like the elite tier firepower paddle with a good sweet spot. I'm not gonna over talk this thing because yes, I've seen 6 prototypes and I don't know if this 6th one is exactly the one that's going to production. So don't go out and buy one with my code at least, please, yet, because I don't want to be responsible for sending people to Honolulu and them not receiving what they thought based on my recommendation. I'm just giving you what I know based on the 6 paddles that I've hit. So as yet, undetermined. We will see what hits the market.
Bit of a masterclass in marketing buzz, though.
Jam, the owner, knows what he's doing when it comes to working this system. Not that he's doing anything nefarious or anything. He's smart.
All right. Any timetable for the CR?
No. He may have told me. I feel like it's going to come soon.
All right.
Probably January.
Okay. Aaron Morgan, 8864. Do you predict 2026? The trend will be that all brands will be chasing longer-lasting grit.
Yes, I think that is a very noble thing to chase in 2026. So, we're seeing the Diamond Grit on 6.0. We're seeing Infinigrit on Boomstick. We're seeing Spartus follow suit. I hear some things from 11.624 in the works in similar fashion. So, yes, the big question is, does infusing peel ply with grit, extend the life of the grit, of the spin? So we will be testing it. I do think it's a very valid theory and certainly something that I'll be looking to main a paddle with one of those characteristics, right? How about you, Eddie? What do you think of it?
Oh, I think definitely that's going to be an area of focus. We've already seen it with a handful of paddles now. We'll just continue to see development in that area. Mm-hmm. What else do you predict for 2026, John?
I think for full foam paddles, I think we're going to see a lot more experimentation with different types of foam, so like PBAS, different types of soft, denser foam to kind of intelligently manipulate the weighting of the paddle. We know we had to have relatively high density foam in the center of the paddle to pass PB core and deflection. But there are softer foams that are very dense. So instead of putting like MOI weights on the outside of the paddle, why not stick some, instead of the soft EVA, stick some higher density, softer foam to give you that both the trampoline effect as well as the good feel that you get with the softer EVA. But stick those at 9 and 3 or a little higher, mess around with higher density, like silicone foam, you can get really high density and very soft. PBAS is stiffer, but also springier. So messing around with like internal weighting with the different types of foam in that regard to really intelligently distribute the weight in a paddle. Also, the center foam, we're going to see more and more of the molded varieties of foam where they're putting in grooves in the foam to enhance different types of dwell. And there's kind of lateral dwell. If you take a paddle and kind of bend it on its long axis, there's also taco dwell, right? And that taco dwell, I think, is very appealing for spin because it's like the cross strings on a tennis racket. It kind of grabs the ball, pockets it, and then releases it. That's why I think on the Boomstick, that has that. And layup is part of this too. They have the unique surface layup where it's almost all vertical unidirectional carbon fiber instead of doing it at 90 degrees. So it's enhancing that taco band. So there's also internal ways to do that. I think molding I can go on for days, Eddie. I think molding the center core, the EPP, is the way to go, especially if you're using any kind of grooves or designs within the foam to enhance dwell. Because what I think we're finding is that when you use a CNC machine to actually cut that foam, you're cutting into the beads of the foam, which creates kind of it kind of absorbs some of the power potential and spring potential of that and makes it a softer, kind of mushier feel versus molding that in where all the beads are intact. They're just kind of pushed away from those designs. So you're leaving the spring potential into the foam. So tons of potential there. Also putting, different types of foam to either enhance I think like tailoring to people's personal feel of a paddle, where they're not like stiff or soft versus dense or hollow, and coming up with paddles that appeal to different groups based on, those vibration nodes, and using different types of foam to either enhance the connection to the ball or dampen it according to people's tastes.
And do you think raw carbon fiber is still the face of choice?
It is for the moment.
Yeah.
If these new grit infused peel ply textures do as promised, I think that will be a clean sweep in 2026.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And if nobody patents it and just starts suing everybody for using that same technology.
And the end of polypropylene.
I don't think so.
No?
I think it's, it's like the Alice in Chains song, Here They Come to Get the Rooster. It ain't going to die. Polypropylene ain't going nowhere. People still love the feel of polypropylene. And maybe we'll actually see, we'll see a trend towards full foam, and then maybe there's already a backlash. Like a lot of people are like, I love my polypropylene. Don't pry it out of my cold, dead hand.
All right.
But yeah, I think it still has a role.
Very good. That's our show for the week, John.
All right, Eddie. Thanks so much.
Yep. Happy holidays.